you very much, worship team. We've been thinking and even this morning singing about change, and as Ray said, it's the change that happens on the inside that counts. As we've been doing this 1 month to live challenge and thinking about the changes that you would want made in your life if you only had 1 month to live. I trust that all of us here this morning at some time have thought about how long we're going to live. We've faced our mortality in some way, not so much in a morbid way, but maybe you've had a near-miss car accident, or maybe it's been a chronic illness or some health problems. Maybe you've found a lump and you're waiting for the test results. Or even attending a funeral sometimes causes us to face our own mortality. Well, I had such an experience, it was well over 15 years ago now, where I thought I was having a heart attack. I woke up in the middle of the night and the pain was so excruciating that I couldn't move, and it was radiating down my arm, and I thought to myself, all the classic symptoms, this could be it. And I seriously thought, I may be dying. Well, Fred called the ambulance and I made the trip to the hospital, and I stayed in the hospital long enough to have all of the tests run to find out that I was okay, and it was a post-stress that my body was experiencing as I had just come out of an extremely traumatic weekend. And although I had faced that crisis without any ill effects to my body, it was like my body was now catching up to the stress of it all. And it kind of manifested in that way where it appeared to be like a heart attack. And of course, I was thankful to be okay, but in those moments, I faced my mortality. I thought, this could be it. I could be dying right now in these moments. And essentially, that is what we're doing together as we take this 1 month to live challenge. As we read the book, as we interact with the small group questions that are in your program, as we listen to these 4 sermon series, these themes, we are actually facing our mortality not in a gloomy sort of way, not in a morbid way, but in a good way, in a way that will motivate us to bring about those changes in our lives that are necessary to live more intentionally and more with the purpose that God has created us for and destined us to live. And so we are facing our mortality together in that sense. Last week's message was living passionately, living each day as if it were your last. And today's message is love completely, showing others love that transcends and transforms. And so we're going to be considering those relationships that are in our lives and what we need to do to bring about change so that we can be loving more intentionally with the love that God has poured into us. And each week we will focus on a different theme. As you see, they're up here on the banners. And these themes are going to help us examine our lives and consider our priorities and to think about how we spend our life so that we can ask God to help us bring about those changes that will help us to live more passionately and to love more completely. This morning you received in your program the information and the pledge sheets for Lynn's Legacy Run. We talked a little bit about this last week. The 1 month to live Burlington churches are coming together to support this initiative, and we're inviting everyone in the churches to consider how you might be involved, whether you want to run, whether you want to walk, whether you want to sponsor someone, or whether you want to get involved in the program that day in perhaps another way. We really want to get behind this. Much of the money is going to a program called Reach Forth, which is a sports-related program, a Christian-based program that actually reaches children through sports with the gospel. And some of you may know Lynn McTaggart. Lynn and Bill attend Tapestry, which is one of the participating churches, along with their family. And Lynn has a terminal illness, and she has a very short time to live. And we want to invite you this morning to hear a little bit more about her story when she was interviewed by Moira Brown just a few weeks ago on 100 Huntley Street.
A rare form of cancer has threatened Lynn McTaggart since she was diagnosed December 2009. But she's still on the run and inviting you to join her. Welcome, Lynn. It's a real privilege to have you here. I'm surprised you drove yourself here.
I'm as independent as I can be. Enjoy being as active and independent as I'm able.
You have quite a story. I want to say that you are an athlete from the get-go, and I'm sure that makes what you're dealing with doubly shocking.
Shocking would be a good word. Yeah, absolutely. December 2009, when I was first diagnosed, shock would be an initial response that both my husband and I, and then my family had. I think you always feel that if you're in good shape and you're eating the right foods and you have a positive outlook on life, and I had a strong faith that seemed to be the components that would be necessary for a long life. I had a grandfather who lived till 96. Surely that would be me. But then you get a diagnosis that says you have a 7.5 centimeter tumor already in your liver, and you think, whoa.
Chest pains, that was spring '09.
Right, spring '09, I said to Bill, my husband, you know, hon, every time I work out, I just can't get my time better, which was frustrating to me. Of course, he's laughing, thinking, would that I could run 20 minutes in 19. And I'm saying, I'm feeling some chest pain about an hour after I run. It's kind of odd.
And this, in fact, is a very rare biliary cancer.
Extremely
biliary
rare.
For bile duct or
got it.
gallbladder. That's,
Yeah.
I had to Google this. I'd
Yeah.
never heard of this.
Yeah.
In fact, your family doctor had never heard of it. You're a nurse and you'd never heard of it.
I'd never heard of it. We had to do the same thing, go to Google and look it up, and find very little information because it's a very rare disease.
ICC.
Intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma.
Boy, what was that earthquake for you, your family?
I went to the doctor that day alone. My husband had offered to come with me, and I'm, you know, stellarly independent. I don't need anybody. Immediately I needed someone, called him, he came over, and we started the journey together. And it changes your life instantly. We sort of said, well, when will we tell the kids? The kids were in university, they were starting into exams, we don't want to tell them. A family doctor said, no, it's pretty imminent, you need to talk to the kids. So we decided we'd do what we always did, which was go down to the Christmas parade in Niagara-on-the-Lake. You know, here we are a family of late teens, early 20s, and we still go to a Christmas parade, but that's okay, that's our family.
Let's put a picture to that. We have a fabulous family picture here.
Okay, so that's our family. We go to a Christmas parade. And so we went to the Christmas parade having planned that Bill and I would tell the kids when we got back. And we met with the family right away after the parade in the house, and immediately I just sort of got right to the goods. This is what's up. And, you know, there's shock. There's every response that you would expect, from tears to just disbelief. Mom, you sure? This can't be right.
You would be, what, 51?
I was, at that time, 50. Turning 51 in the February. Yeah, 50 years old, turning 51. And there was everything that there is today. There's every emotion. There's anger. There's the sense of, it can't be real. Have they missed something? And, you know, for the first 2 weeks, I would honestly say from December 9th, when I first found out, for 2 weeks, I really wrestled with God. Just quietly. I'm not a talker to anybody. And I just kept saying, really, God? Like, are you sure you don't need me? Like, my kids need me. My husband needs me. I have some really solid friends, and I love my work in Reach Forth. Are you sure? And who's going to look after my kids? And it was like, not an earthquake that happened in my brain, but one day I was working out at the Y, which is sort of my solace. And I was on one of my treadmill machines, and it was like quietly God just said to me, really, Lynn? Like, who do you think you are, that you're the only one who can look after your family? And I kind of got this like, oh, would this be that I'm a little proud? I'm not proud. I'm kind of a humble person. And it was just like God said, I can take care of you, and I will take care of your family. You don't need to know how. You just need to know that you have my promise that I will. And so I just said to God, okay, you take care of my family, I'm just going to use every day to serve you, whatever that means.
Have you reached for the miracle?
I have, absolutely. We had church elders come and pray and lay hands and pray for healing. And I still pray for a complete and total healing. To date, it doesn't appear that God's desire is to heal me physically. And I say that with the comfort of knowing that He could. I really believe He can still do that. But also recognize that He has performed many little miracles over the last 2 years that are just amazing to me. And so God just brings it together and says, I have a purpose far greater than you, Lynn. And even this morning when I got up, I just said, you know, God, I don't know what you want to do, but whatever you want to do it.
Well, then God is using you in an even broader sense. He gave you a vision as the journey began.
He did.
And it seems to be an expanding vision.
It does.
Tell us about it.
Well, we'd always thought in Reach for Sports, where I work as a part-time sports director, that we'd like to do a road race. But it's a lot of work to put together a road race. We're a not-for-profit organization, small, mostly volunteers. And so as I was diagnosed, Steve, the director, and my husband thought, aha, this is the moment for Lynn's run. And we talked a lot about legacy. What is it that we leave? And again, one moment I thought, we all leave a legacy. Whether it's good or bad, every day I leave a mark. So we sort of start to put those ideas together of a legacy run and a walk, because I wanted everybody to be able to be involved. I love kids, so we thought, let's do a 1K fun run. I love the whole concept that everybody could be involved, whether you're a single mom with some kids or a single dad with some kids or a mom and dad. We wanted everybody to be able to say, hey, I can participate. So out of that developed a Lynn's Legacy Run.
It makes it personal.
Yeah, and I think, again, that was where God just, I always say I needed 2 or 3 days to kind of do my personal wrestling with God, where He says, Lynn, it's not about you, it's about me. And then I'd be like, okay, if that's the case, go for it. So we had the first Lynn's Legacy Run, May 22nd, 2011.
How many people participated in the
We
first
had
one?
over 300 people,
Very good.
which was really neat to
You have a
see.
much bigger goal for the
We
second
do.
annual.
We do. For the second annual, which will be on May 21st, 2012, we'd like to see in excess of 1,000 people. And we'd love to raise over $100,000, partnered this year with the Juravinsky Cancer Center in Hamilton, really specifically for biliary cancers, to raise money for both research and equipment. So this is an opportunity for us to contribute, perhaps in a small but meaningful way.
Could bring meaningful change.
Yeah, meaningful change.
Let's put up a page, because this is a family affair.
It is.
Remember, you can walk, and the children's walk is just 1K.
1 kilometer. Yeah.
So this is a delightful day out. Monday, May 21st, you were given 3 to 6 months.
That's right. At a visit with my medical oncologist, Dr. Phillips, who's, again, an amazing physician, she said there's no more treatment that would benefit you at this point. And so you have that hard discussion. So I didn't go home and start marking my calendar. I went home and I said, okay, all the more reason I just got to make sure every day is like, whatever, God, you want me to do, I want to make the most of it. And sometimes when I can't sleep at night, it's because I think I'm wasting time. I want to get up and do this and send an email to this person and encourage that person. And, you know, maybe just play a game and have some fun with the kids, because we're just really real people. You know, we sit around the table and play Dutch Blitz and lots of fun games together, and that's meaningful as a family too, because you can't spend every day thinking about the end, but spending each day building into each other's lives in a way that they'll want to continue on, even when I'm no longer here, that they'll have caught that vision. And as I see my husband out trying to get sponsors for the run, he's got the vision. As much as he looks at his wife and says, I don't know, he still has passion. And I want those kids, my friends, to share that passion long beyond my days on earth. And as much as there'll be grief, I want there to be excitement in knowing that life here is short. Whether you have 50 or 90 years, it's still short. And too soon we'll all face our Creator. And I want my friends to know that it's whether they have a relationship with Jesus Christ that really, really matters. Everything else, it's kind of immaterial. Whether I'm in great shape, you know, I said I'm the living example of it's what's on the inside that counts. I have so many people say, oh, you still look good, you're running, you're active. And I say, yeah, but if you looked at my CAT scan and you realized the disease, the tumors in my liver, the tumors in my lung, the tumors in my mediastinum. And so we can fake other people out by what's on the outside. We can put makeup on and look good. And yet on the inside we can be filled with sin and just despair. And I just encourage people that if you're feeling that today, you know what? God has a hope for you beyond the grave, to give you something to live for tomorrow. And I just know in my work, both as a nurse previously and in Reach Forth, there's a lot of pain in the world. Mental pain, physical pain. And I suffer somewhat, but nothing compared to other people. Okay, I press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold of me, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Philippians 3:12-14.
What a testimony. And Lynn's parents are a part of our church, and we have prayed for Lynn and her family in the past and need to continue to pray for her. For her family, the theme that we're exploring is not an abstraction. It's something very real to them. And so I encourage you to consider how you might be involved with all the area churches in this Lynn's Legacy Run in a few weeks' time. Well, this week's theme, loving completely. Now, Jesus commanded us to love our neighbors as we would love ourselves. And love brings men and women together in romantic relationships, marriage. Love binds families together. Love, it's a theme of more poems, the plot of more movies, the topic of more conversations, the pursuit of more people. And if you and I really thought we only had 1 month to live, it would shape how we cared for our world of relationships and how we handle this wonderful quality of love. Love has this incredible power to transform, to heal, to restore, to rebuild, and to inspire. And so while many poets and artists and playwrights and musicians and romantics have sought to describe love, I believe that perhaps the most powerful illustration of love that we can ever know or experience is embodied and represented in the initiative of God Himself. In fact, we just talked about it a couple of weeks ago as we explored the whole theme of unprecedented love. The unprecedented of love as God displayed His profound, enduring, unending, sacrificial love to human beings in the sending of His Son Jesus to die substitutionary and sacrificially in our place. And when as a young teen I encountered that love did a work of transformation in my heart. And I know that so many of you would speak to that same story of how encountering the love of God began to do a work of transformation in your heart and in your life. And so as we begin to think about this theme of loving completely, I want us to think with biblical thoughts. I want us to think about biblical love. I want us to think about love from the biblical lens and identify some biblical insights as it relates to love. And so certainly foundationally is we have this incredible picture of love represented in Jesus. But God doesn't just show us love. The pages of Scripture teach us about love. And so I want to read to you perhaps the most well-known passage on love, a passage that perhaps you've heard at a lot of weddings, but strangely, I can't remember when I last spoke on this passage here in a Sunday service. But I want you to listen to these powerful, inspired words from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. The Apostle Paul says this, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. And if I give all I have away, and if I deliver my body to be burned but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Love never ends. And then Paul concludes this chapter by saying, so now faith, hope, and love abide. These three, but the greatest of these is love. Now, this is poetry. Inspired poetry, but it's poetry nevertheless. And poetry can be interpreted. I'm not sure we think of poetry as something we exegete, but nevertheless, let's exegete this a little bit. Let's break this poem down just a little bit, and let's identify some of the high points that Paul's trying to communicate to us about love. So we have some accurate insights, some biblical insights as to what love is. And the first observation we can make is that Paul's saying here, unless we have love in our speech, we have nothing. Unless I have love in my speech, I have nothing. And Paul here says that the tongue is a powerful instrument for good or for ill. It can be kind or it can be critical. It can be sympathetic or it can be sarcastic. It can be encouraging or it can be antagonizing. And Paul says, if I don't have love in the way I speak to people, I am a noisy gong or I'm a clanging cymbal. And so love should drip with grace. Our language should just be dripping with grace, and it should be, our word choices should be polished with kindness. And the intentions of our communication, even when they're of a corrective nature, the intention of our communication should always be somehow to build up, to encourage, to edify, to compliment, to support, to bless, to affirm, and to love. And so in light of the theme of loving completely means that love is something that's spoken. Now Paul goes on to talk about knowledge. And then he says, unless I have love in my knowledge, again, I have nothing. And so the imagery or the analogy that Paul uses here is that of knowledge. He talks about having knowledge of spiritual mysteries, of faith that can move mountains, knowledge of prophetic insights, and certainly of relational knowledge, because we all know how this works, don't we? As we get to know each other in relationships, those little idiosyncrasies which once we found so humorous and so welcoming and so engaging and so attractive, they eventually become irritants. And as we get to know people more deeply, that knowledge has all the potential to cause us to take each other for granted, to assume and presume upon that relationship, and then to even nitpick. And Paul says, unless I have love in my knowledge, whether it's about truth or whether it's about relationships, unless I've got love in my knowledge, I have nothing. Because we all know what knowledge without love is. It's arrogant. And we've all had conversations with people who know more than we do. And the arrogance just spills over. And Paul says, if we don't have love in our knowledge, we have nothing. If we don't have love in our speech, we have nothing. And then Paul says, if we don't have love in our actions, we have nothing. Look at verse 4 again. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. It's not boastful. It's not arrogant. It's not rude. It doesn't insist on having its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. Does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Unless we have love in our actions, we have nothing at all. You see, Paul is trying to correct a misconception that was held then as it is held today. That love is far more than just an emotion. And the cultural context that we find ourselves in peddles that message all the time, that love is an emotion. Love is kind of a zone that we just find ourselves in. It's a mood, or it's a feeling, it's a sensation that just simply descends on us without warning, without boundaries, without reason, and without resistance. And Paul here is saying love is far more than emotion. Now, the Bible talks about emotions, and we are emotional beings, and we ought not to suppress or deny these emotions. But Paul tells us love is way more than just how you feel about people. Love is something you say, and love is something you know, and love is something you do. And so, as we think biblically about love, and a couple of weeks ago, as we talked about unprecedented love, we talked about this word hesed in the Old Testament, this Hebrew word meaning loyal love, that God has a loyal love for us. He just doesn't feel love. He demonstrates a loyal love to us. And then when we come to the New Testament, we look at the Greek language, the language of the New Testament, we read about this agape love, which speaks of an unconditional love. And so as we seek to form an understanding of what love is from a biblical paradigm, from a biblical basis, we see that love is something we say, we know, and we live out. And unless we have love in our speech and in our knowledge and in our actions, we have absolutely nothing. Now, I want to add to our biblical understanding. It's absolutely profoundly foundational that we think biblically about love. But I do want to add some human insights to love. I do want to add some additional insights from the whole realm of human relationships and from psychology and from anthropology. And let me illustrate it with a couple of resources. Dr. Gary Chapman has written a book a number of years ago called The 5 Languages of Love. Now, Chapman in this case is himself a Christ follower, and so he comes at the language of love or the whole discussion of love from a biblical lens. But this bestseller describes something very unique. He observes how a lot of marriage relationships, and this is particularly a marriage book, but he says a lot of marriage relationships feel very loveless. And marriages can go on for years, and both husband and wife can feel like they're not connecting. And they may feel love for each other, but they're not connecting in their communication of love. And Chapman's whole thesis is because that husband or that wife doesn't understand the language of love of their spouse. And so if we could understand what their love language is, we could be able to communicate love to them in a way that's understood and received and valued and appreciated. So, what Chapman does is he's identified 5 languages, to use his metaphor, his terms. And let me share these with you briefly. He talks about words of affirmation. Actions don't always speak louder than words. If this is your love language, unsolicited comments mean the world to you. Hearing the words, "I love you," or moreover, the reasons why you are loved, just sends your spirit soaring. Similarly so, insults, harsh words cut you particularly deep. But words of affirmation, words of kindness, words of praise, words of encouragement, words of endorsement just communicate to you in ways that just fill your cup. Some of you respond to the language of words of affirmation. Chapman also talks about quality time. In the vernacular of quality time, nothing says "I love you" like focused, undivided attention. Being there for that person is absolutely critical. And so you're there with the TV off, with the smartphone on vibrate, the knife and fork are down, the chores are all put on standby, and you're engaged, and you're focused. And the worst thing you could do would be to drift, would to be succumb to distraction. But when you're focused, and when you're engaged, and when your spouse knows that they're being listened to, and they have your complete 100% undivided attention, they feel loved. Chapman talks about a third area, receiving gifts. And this isn't about materialism by any means, because this has nothing to do with the value of the gifts. But some of you, as you receive gifts, that just fills your cup so passionately. And so it's not just the actual gift that you received, but it's the thoughtfulness. and the intentionality behind that gift that speaks so meaningfully to you. And so, if this is your love language, when you receive gifts like this, that is the communication of love that you most resonate with. And so a missed birthday, a missed anniversary, a missed opportunity to receive a gift particularly hurts you. But for some of you, receiving some sort of token, it doesn't have to be expensive, but it's meaningful. And it's the thought behind that gift that so profoundly communicates love to you. And then there are others of you who respond to acts of service. Can vacuuming the house be a communication of love? Absolutely. Because some of you want to have your spouse enter into your world by offering to help. And for you, the most significant words you could hear would be, let me do that for you. Listen, guys, for some of you, going home and vacuuming might be the most significant thing you could do to say, I love you to your spouse. And don't forget the corners. But broken commitments, those things, laziness, failure to engage, passivity at the home, is exactly the undoing of that love language. And then finally, Chapman talks about physical touch. And this isn't about so much intimacy or the bedroom, but rather this person's language of love is all about hugs and pats in the back and hand-holding and thoughtful touches on the arm or the shoulder, the face. And these just are their avenue of receiving love and accepting love. Similarly so, or opposite-wise, abuse and physical pain just cuts so deeply to people who respond to physical touch as their language of love. And so there are all kinds of marriages in this room where there is love felt between husband and wife. And you may feel a huge heart of emotion for your spouse. But you know it's just not being received. And it may be because you're not perceptive to the language that your spouse will receive love in. Or perhaps you're not even aware of your own love language. And so Chapman's whole thesis is that we seek to learn the love language of our spouse so that we can not just feel love, but that we communicate love as accurately as possible. Now, let me just branch out from there just a little bit. Ross Campbell has written a book called How to Really Love Your Child. Again, another bestseller, excellent book. And he, too, talks about a lot of ways, very specific ways we can communicate love to our children. If you're a parent, young parent, this would be a good read for you, and maybe in our library. I think Chapman's book also was in our library. But he talks about eye contact. You know, just holding your child's face in your hands and just engaging with them. And giving them words of affirmation and telling them that you love them, telling them that you're good at this, and telling them that you're proud of them. And physical contact and the tickling and the hugs and sitting on your lap, and particularly for you as dads, you so profoundly shape particularly the sexual identity of your daughters in appropriate physical connection and affection to your daughter. And focused attention. And so there are all kinds of books and tools that give us human insights as to how we can communicate love to each other. And so as a staff, we've worked through the DISC tool, which is a way of helping us understand how our styles of relating, our styles of operation. And there's Marriage Enrich. And there's all kinds of tools which can help us communicate love. Why am I citing these? Why am I citing Chapman's material or Campbell's research? I'll tell you why I'm citing this. Because demonstrating love does not come intuitively to all of us. Some of you in this room were raised in extraordinarily functional, warm homes. And your parents lavished love on you. And your parents communicated love to you in one way, and they communicated love to your sibling in another way, and they just knew you both, and they just intuited. And that environment has given you some additional skills that you find much more intuitive and easily applied in your life. But you need to know that there's all kinds of people in this room, and there's all kinds of people in this community, and all kinds of people in this world who did not grow up in functional environments, where they did not see love communicated in healthy, functional ways. And some of you young people and some of you young adults, you're going to find yourselves in relationships and in marriages where one came out of a more functional environment and the other came out of a less functional environment, and you're not going to connect. You're going to feel love for each other, but you're not going to know how to communicate that love to each other. And that's why we need sometimes these additional human insights to add to our understanding of biblical insights, our biblical understanding of love, but we need these human insights to help us to demonstrate love and to show love. Listen, I did not see any tenderness in my parents' relationship. Zero. I did not see displays of affection in my parents as I was growing up. Zero. I did not see functional conflict resolution in my home. Zero. And so as I watched my parents, and as my parents split up when I was 11, 12, I thought, why would anyone want to get married? Seriously. I mean, if that's marriage. And then, and I remember this, even as I'm sharing this with you now. My mother was a hairstylist, a hairdresser. And we lived in the country, and my dad built a little salon for her in our house, attached to our house. And so, certainly this was the case before I went to school, but even as I started going to school and as I'd come home after school, and particularly if the weather was bad and I wasn't outside, I would be pretty close to the orbit of that salon for at least a few hours after school while my mom was doing hair. And I can remember how many women would come in and have their hair done by my mother, and they would just rag on their husbands, on and on and on, thinking, why would anyone want to get married? Really? That was my experience. And I really believed that until I met Linda. And I started to think differently. But it wasn't just meeting Linda. It was meeting her parents and getting to know her parents. Because in her parents, I saw authentic, functional love. And they've been married for 60 years now, and they still hold hands. And Charles is still very excited to do the vacuuming. So look, we need all the help we can get. Now I want to leave you with some very pointed application this morning. I want to leave with 3 very specific can-do principles to help you in living love completely, in showing love completely. Not just feeling it, but showing it. And the curious thing is, as I was preparing for this week, I thought these are the exact principles that I use every day when I have my quiet time devotions. And for those of you who are part of my accountability orbit, every day when I read the Word, I ask myself 3 questions. Observation, interpretation, application. What does the text say? What does the biblical text mean 2,000 years later? What was true then that's true today? What's the transferable principle? And then thirdly, I ask myself application. What does this passage mean to me today? How can I apply this biblical truth today? How can it make a difference today? How can it transform the way I live today? Observation, interpretation, application. Observation, interpretation, application. I do this every time I come to sermon preparation and every day when I have my own personal Bible reading. Great 3 questions to ask yourself. Make a few notes. It's amazing how quickly you become an expert at studying Scripture. But I want to leave you those same principles in your world of relationships. Observation. I want to invite you to be a student of your spouse. I want to invite you to look carefully at your children. And if you have more than one, they are different. And they respond differently to your words of affirmation. They respond differently to your words of discipline. They respond differently to motivation. And so you need to become a student of the people in your home. And you need to become a student of the people you work with, your colleagues. And you need to become a student of your neighbor. Jesus said to love your neighbor. And so we need to be students of our neighbor. We need to know our neighbors before we can love our neighbors. And so observe. Just start with observation. What do you see? Think about it. Don't just feel it. Think about it. And then ask yourself, what does this mean? Interpretation. Observation, interpretation. What does this mean? What fills my wife's cup? And why is it that when I do this, she's so responsive? Why is it when I don't do this, she's so unresponsive? And what is it that my kids resonate with? And what is it that my work colleagues respond so well to? And what is it that brings a smile to my neighbor? And then finally, application. Observation, what do you see? Interpretation, what does this mean? What does what you see mean? But then application, do something about it. Determine that you're going to love completely. You're going to love in a biblical way, in a love that speaks, in a love that knows, in a love that acts, not just feels, but is demonstrated. And so in the world of marriage, cultivate those gestures of love through actions, whether they're big or small, whether it's through ceremony or routines, whether it's the kiss goodnight, the celebration of a special anniversary, a call or email in the middle of the day, whether it's breakfast in bed, an evening walk, a Saturday morning breakfast, or whether it's vacuuming the family room. Whatever it is, communicate those gestures of love. Communicate in the language of love that you see your spouse resonating with. And as to our parenting, what fires up your children? What inspires your daughter? What makes your son respond to him? And lavish them with praise. And with your work colleagues, what do they respond to? And so you affirm them, and you promote them, and you reward them, and you do whatever you can do, whatever's in your power to love completely. And when it comes to your neighbor whom Jesus asked us to love, whom Jesus commanded us to love, we find out what their needs are because we've observed and we've interpreted, and now we're applying. And we seek to love them completely. If you and I really only had 1 month to live, how would we live differently? How would we treat our world of relationships? If I only had 1 month to live, I would want my wife to know that I love her. I don't want her just to know that I feel it. I want to communicate it. And I would want my kids to know beyond a shadow of a doubt, because of the things I do and the things I say, that they know they're loved. And I would want to know my work colleagues, all of whom I cherish and value so deeply. I'd want to know that I think so highly of them. And I would want my neighbors, with whom I smile when we cut the grass, to know that I'm interested in more than nice grass. I'd want them to know that I care. And I don't want to just live that way for a month. I'd want to live like that all the time. Because if we don't have that kind of a love that speaks, a love that knows, and a love that acts, if we don't have that kind of a love, what do we have? Nothing. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, thank you that you have modeled love for us in the person of your Son, Jesus. God demonstrated his love towards us in this, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And you invite us into a relationship with you because of that love. You have shown love. You just didn't feel it. You showed it to us. And we see it. And we can experience it. And we can be transformed by it. And then you ask us to partner with you and take that same love with which we've been transformed by, and you ask us to show it to others. God, would you allow love to be in every word we say? Would you allow love to be the filter of all of our knowledge? And would you allow love to be a part of our every action, today and every day? This we pray in the name of Jesus, who can make it so in our experience and in our lives. Amen.